the best champions in the entire game for the Sand Devil dungeon. Do you have them? It's quite possible. Let's dive into it. What up team, it is MurderInc. We are on the test server right now. We're going to be going over the best champions for you and your account to progress through the Sand Devil dungeon, the newly released dungeon which gives you access to the Ascension system. So let's start off with Banner Lords. Now there's going to be a ton, and I mean like the original video I did, it gave you an example and options of over 100 champions you can use. Am I going to be talking about 100 champions today? No. The thing is, I want to know if I missed somebody because I've been doing my own testing. I've been kind of in my own bubble as far as who's good, who's not good. I've done a little bit of research outside of it, but nowhere near enough to say everyone I'm talking about here is it as far as the best champions. Not just good, but the best champions. So if I miss someone, definitely comment below saying, Murder, you overlooked this guy, and I'll probably go into the test server because I'm addicted and test them out and just see how good. Maybe your comment is going to lead to another awesome team in the future. So definitely take the time to leave a comment if I miss someone. The first thing from Banner Lords, Septimus. Massive champion, scales really well through all 25 stages. He's a fantastic affinity for the final stage, which is going to be small bonus points, not a ton, but very small bonus points for this champion here. And he's actually going to be the only one from the Banner Lords that I'm going to consider for this. Lugan's good, Baron's good for the lower stages, Champ War you can make work for sure, but as far as like the best of the best, I cannot go any further than that. Let's move to epic champions here. No one's really sticking out as far as I can see here. There are some revivers you can use for sure, but outside of that, as far as consistency throughout each and every single dungeon, I don't see anyone else from the Banner Lords. So let's move on to High Elves. And once looking at High Elves, kind of just a one-time over, no one really kind of jumps out to me as a best of the best champion. So since there's nobody as far as a best champion in the legendary section, let's go ahead and move on to the epics. Royal Guard, enemy max health, cannot be overlooked by any means here. So he is going to definitely remain as one of the best champions for this content that you can use. Rares, no one special. As far as the remaining champions here, no one special as well that really jumps out to me as being the best. Moving on to Sacred Order, there are some options here. So Cardiel, very, very strong. Obvious, Revive on Death. Roshkard the Tower, Sir Nicholas can have their use in certain unkillable teams, but the Maneater teams are much more consistent because they also apply block debuff, so I'm not going to consider them the best, but they're kind of like on that border, they're just slightly below. Outside of that, there's no one else on the legendary side of Sacred Order that's really standing out to me. Next we have the epics, quite a few. Cardinal for sure, building her in stone skin gear, using her to survive the initial A3 hit, instantly reviving a champion. It's a single revive, it's not an AoE revive, but there have already been some teams in the work here, so this is like an unofficial best of the best champion for the Sand Devil because the teams haven't really been released yet. Light Sworn, on the other hand, we've already seen the teams that I've made. He's really good. There are definitely other teams that use Light Sworn as well. Godseeker and Eerie is part of kind of niche teams, not the most consistent teams, but can be used to duo or trio some of the higher stages. And as far as that, some of the best champions, none of these other champions that are epics really ring true here. The last champion worth mentioning kind of is Armiger. He's much easier to build on the lower stages, but I do think he's one of the best champions at the lower stages because he does have this enemy max health ability and based on defense, of course, which is why once you start getting to stage 24 and 25, he's just nowhere near as good as someone like a Husk, Septimus, Royal Guard. If you can use him on stage 24, he's just going to fall behind because the gear requirement starts getting pretty crazy for a uncommon champion like this. Moving on to Barbarians here, Valkyrie is good, Tuhanarok is good. Outside of that, there's not much as far as the best champions that are possible here. And unfortunately, another faction where the Epics only has one strong candidate, which is Skytouch Shaman, who's a part of many very strong teams for this new dungeon here. Outside of that, the rares, uncommons, and commons are lacking for sure in the best champion category. The next thing we're going to have is Orgryn Tribes. We have no legendaries that I can currently see. And of course, Maneater is going to stand out quite heavily. And narrowing the scope from the entire Sand Devil, meaning stage 1 through 25, if you start shrinking that to stage, let's say 1 through 15, Grush the Mangler. I'm kind of obsessed with this guy, but hear me out here. Every team I've tried this guy in, between his debuffs, his healing, the leech buff he can add, if you can get him timed right, he's an insanely strong asset. So I would keep him on this list as far as one of the best champions you can use. He has a free login reward, but once you get past stage 15, I think his value drops significantly. So it's not going to be the best for the entirety, but for the lower stages for sure, Grush is extremely strong. Outside of that, in Rare Land as well as Uncommon Land, we do not have anyone else as far as a best champion goes. Next, we have Lizardmen. Who can we use for the Lizardmen? Void Legendaries. It's always hard to talk about Void Legendaries because they're so rare. Chagur is going to be very strong. I've seen a couple teams with Nekmothar. I don't know a lot about it, so he's kind of a question mark for me. He could be in some teams. I do have the champion, but I haven't done enough testing to consider him in this video per se as a top champion. Moving on to the epics for Lizardmen, Korgan. Sleeper OP has a fantastic kit for what's needed on the higher stages. Outside of that, no one really jumps to mind. For rares, we have one of the unique rares in the game, Muckstalker, farmable, awesome, consistent sleep, as consistent as 3% chance allows, and really good champion overall because of his base stats. Next, we have the Skinwalkers. As much as I want to say the new Fusion Nishak is going to be good, there's some type of issue. I'm not sure what it is or why it's happening, but the protected poisons are being cleansed from the Sand Devil. If that's fixed, I think he's going to be a solid option for sure. His extra turn may mess things up. I don't really know yet, because I really haven't been able to test after seeing that his protected poisons are just getting wiped away by the A3 ability. But out of all of the champions here, he has shown the most promise for sure. As far as epics go, no one stands out. The same thing applies for rares and under. Moving on to the Orc faction, who do we have? Absolutely nobody. I saw an interesting take on someone like Robar. Is A3 doing increased damage with champions under sleep? With a guaranteed sleep like this, if you're not familiar with this, Robar has one of the hardest hitting AoEs in the entire game. The problem is, this isn't necessarily an AoE scenario, so you would now be considering this A3 against the hardest hitting single target abilities, and it's not as strong. So while he can be used for some pretty pumper damage, he's not going to be a top pick for one of the most broken champions in the game. Moving on to the epics, once again, a champion that is better on the lower stages as opposed to the higher is going to be Sandlash Survivor. Her passive, insanely strong. Ally protection is most likely to kill 99.99% of champions with the Sand Devil because he just slaps. The fact that you have an ally protection with a block damage that's on a passive is very strong. Also, increasing the duration of buffs on allies can be very beneficial to your team. So overall, Sandlash isn't one of the best champions, but on the earlier stages, Sandlash proves to be extremely strong. Rare and under, there are no champions that really stand out for me. Moving on to the Demonspawn champions, the faction that's usually OP, and this is not an exception. Prince Kaimar, fantastic. Duchess Lilitu, fantastic. There are a few ways you can get Helicath to work, but I don't think it quite meets that best champion category here. Wither and Mortal Macabre also fall in that same, just barely underneath the line of what I would consider a top contending champion for content like this. So now that that's settled, let's move to the epics, see if we have anybody strong here. First glance, I don't see anyone that I've used in any of my testing, most other people's testing for sure. So I'm going to have to give this a pass and not include anyone here. As far as the rare and under, once again, no one is standing out. Moving on to the Undead, another very strong faction. Rhodos, despite him being very strong on stage 15 and under, the fact that he can solo it, he's going to be on that top list for sure without thinking twice about it because of how hard he hits and his passive making lifesteal just a breeze to get through all of this content here. The next champion, Sifi, irresistible sleep, awesome turn meter value here. It's hard to miss on this champion. I've seen Morrigan used a lot, actually a lot on the lower stages. I haven't really seen much use of her on the high stages, probably because most endgame players aren't focused on blue affinity champions because they're kind of bad on stage 25. However, I do believe that if more endgame interest was formulated onto stage 24, despite it being kind of significantly worse in efficiency of farming 24 compared to 25, I think Morrigan would get more, I don't know, teams built around her because she's a really good kit for sure here. So while she is good on the lower stages, I cannot add her to the list, but she's definitely in one tier below. Little Miss Annie, I've actually seen her doing kind of what Rhodos has been doing, not on the soloing side, but the amount of stats she needs to kind of just one-shot the earlier stages of the bosses is quite funny. Maybe I'll do a video if you guys want, if you aren't familiar with Little Miss Annie and watching her in action. I've seen some crazy one-shots already of the Sand Devil with Little Miss Annie on the lower stages, so maybe I'll do that in the future here. Next for epics, we actually have quite a few epics. Husk, 100% top tier champion, Mausoleum Mage, can be used in quite a few teams because of his strong block debuff potential. Outside of that, Vogoth has decent potential but nothing to put him into the top tier brackets. And then we can talk about kind of the meme champion, which is going to be Hellhound. Is he good? Yes. Is he realistic? Not really. Every team I've seen try to showcase this champion had him protected by like 3 or 4 champions, which is kind of a massive waste if you think about it. So would I ever recommend this champion? No. Do I think he's a top tier champion? No. I think he's okay if you want to build a team around this guy, but I do not think he comes anywhere close to the other champions that we are already talking about for who is the best. Next we have Dark Elves. Now Noct, his kit is pretty much perfect. It's like they released this guy for this boss here. We've got sleep, we've got poison, we've got ally protection, continuous heal. So he kind of has the whole package for sure. He's going to be on this list here, but outside of that, there's not many other champions that I could confidently say is a go-to as far as best of the best goes. Moving on to the epics for this, Crimson Helm, like the team I most recently talked about, very strong revive on death. Everyone else, not so much. As far as rares go, Painkeeper's in quite a few teams. Cold Heart can be very strong, but there's kind of a double-edged sword in using Cold Heart because if she reduces the turn meter, even if you build her with no accuracy, your run's probably going to end quite quickly. Next, we have the Knight Revenant, something that hasn't been tested in full yet, but I do believe is going to come out strong, is somebody like Walking Tomb Drang. A double hit, instantly activating HP burn, an HP burn that cannot be resisted, the ability to equalize the health of allies, and then finally an awesome passive here dealing more damage. So like I said, Walking Tomb Drang is kind of in the laboratory right now as far as getting working teams up and running. Maybe you can expect that quite soon, but as of right now there is no concrete evidence of teams that work flawlessly with him all the way throughout the dungeon. Mother Sybil, however, being the only, to my knowledge, that I can think of as consistent at least, revive on death champion with a 3-turn cooldown, can be used in many teams. I don't have her. I would have liked to have made some 3-turn revive on death teams. I'm not sure if, I'm assuming it's been done already, but they would be better than the Sky Eater teams, the Dark Eater team, and what was the other team that was made? Light Eater, that Smiley talked about in his video. So is there potential here? Yes. I don't have the champion, so I can't make the teams, unfortunately. Maybe if someone's watching and they want to play around with it, they can do that for sure. Moving on to the epics, Rector Drath, very, very strong. Doom Priest can have her uses, but not the best because she only cleanses 1 debuff. And there are 2 pretty nasty debuffs that are applied from the A1 of the Sand Devil. Outside of that, I wouldn't recommend anyone else being a top tier champion. As far as rares and under, no one sticks out to me. Moving on to Dwarves, we have Trunda, who's good on the lower levels, under Priest Brogni, of course, if you can utilize the reflect damage. Not a ton of damage, but it adds up. Acrisia, listen, Crizzy is busted, right? This is the best of the best. If you have her, just don't even talk to me. You're in your own level. I don't want to hear about it. I don't feel any sympathy for you if you can't figure out a team. If you have a Crizia, just get good. The champion's so broken, you can use like whoever you want. Outside of that, there are a few interesting options here. Still under testing, still under development, so I don't want to talk about it too much here. But outside of those, Under Priest Brogni and Trunda are good, but viability across the entire dungeon isn't there, so I can't put them as a best of the best champion. Geomancer, the same thing. The boss was kind of built to counter him, which is unfortunate, and deserved at the same time here, so cannot recommend him. Demitha, Canelia have their uses. They have been made in a few teams. I'm not sure about the success rate and the speed of those teams. Canelia is going to have issues because she is blue affinity, which is not good for most of the important farming stages. Demitha can be used, but she also competes for a clan boss spot, so it's up in the air. Would I consider them top tier? Maybe. Geomancer, if you can make him work and not just get one shot. There is a bug currently where he's working in teams that he shouldn't work, where once he gets rid of all of his health from destroyed max HP, he's actually taking 0 damage. A lot of content creators haven't been talking about this bug. They've just been building teams, saying it's really strong with Geomancer, but they don't understand that their teams are only surviving because this guy's bugged and he's just not taking any damage at all. Outside of that, the rares, no one sticks out, as well as the uncommon champions. Moving on to Shadowkin, we have Rio, who is paramount for a lot of teams. Yumeko, who can be good, not so much on the fast teams. Arima is going to let you survive a lot if you do have this champion because of her passive enemy ignore defense effects are decreased by 50%, making that A3 hit not as hard. Ninja, very strong champion, would 100% be in the top tier of champions because even on something like a red affinity, while it is slow, he still pumps. Moving on to the epics for this faction, no one really stands out that I can see here that's been used consistently and effectively throughout every single stage here. Same thing is going to apply with the rares and uncommons. Shiroga the Frog can be good in the earlier stages, but definitely not good enough to sustain you all the way to the end. And finally, Sylvan Watchers. Elva has its place in that kind of meme team with Ninja and Godseeker and Neri. And I might have skipped Godseeker and Neri now that I think about it. I don't think I did, but if I did, Godseeker and Neri is probably bordering the line once again. Hopefully I'm not repeating myself. If I am, I'm sorry about that, but Elva, another champion, not that great overall, but can be used in niche teams for sure. As far as the other Sylvan Watcher legendaries, none of them stand out as far as crazy potential across every single stage. So, did I miss someone? Give me your feedback here. What teams are you running? I've already showed quite a few videos, and most of the chambers that I talked about are in the videos. Some of them are not in the videos that I've already done, but I have seen them with success throughout my clan, the guild Discord, the official Raid Shadow Legend Discord, all of that good stuff. So if I miss someone, leave me a comment. I will check those champions out for sure. That's going to conclude this video here. Hopefully you have some of these champions, or me talking about these champions kind of gave you some drive to test out new teams if you did have anyone that I mentioned. So that's going to conclude this video. If you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you all in my next upload.